This is the brand new Nintendo Switch 2 that came out a couple weeks ago. First off, I want to give Nintendo of Canada a big thank you for sending over this review unit. They are not sponsoring this video, but they did provide the unit for the review, so just full transparency out there. I'm very proud of myself because this is an actual review. All right, so I have clinically diagnosed ADHD. I'm not gonna bore you guys with all the tech jargon. Here's a fancy chart right here that I made in Photoshop, and I'll show you guys the specs of the original Switch versus the specs of the newer Switch. So the original Switch launched at $300 US, and the brand new Nintendo Switch 2 launched at $450. TLDR, just for what I saw visually, you're basically getting PlayStation 4, Xbox One graphics performance in a device that you can put in your backpack that has a screen. I do want to touch on the topic of storage because this is an evergreen topic when we think about video game consoles. So at default, the Nintendo Switch comes packed with 256 gigabytes of internal storage. After OS installation as well as updates, you have about 230 gigabytes to install games with. And depending on what type of gamer you are, this will sound like that's plenty, and some of you guys will be completely outraged that that's not nearly enough. I myself like to buy all my games physically, especially Nintendo ones, because they tend to hold their value very well. But if you're a person who buys all the games online and takes full advantage of the virtual console, then basically 230 gigabytes is going to disappear very quickly. Just as you could with the original Switch, you do have the capability of increasing the storage of the Switch 2 with an external MicroSD Express card up to 2 terabytes. And I'm gonna have to say this is a really important note because this is a completely new class of SD cards. The MicroSD Express cards are recently released. They are faster, they have more pins, and they're basically priced like vibranium. They are about 3 times the price per gigabyte than the previous generation SD cards. And finding different offerings from different companies was basically impossible for me. I could only find the Nintendo branded 256 gigabyte card that was made by Samsung, and that was basically all the options of the time of recording this video. All right, so let's talk about the Joy-Cons because this is a hot topic when we talk about the previous Switch as well as the new Switch. So I myself personally have never experienced Joy-Con drift. That's probably because I played the majority of the time with a Pro controller. One thing I can confirm for you guys is that the joysticks on the Joy-Cons still stink. They are not very good, especially when you compare them to the other companies' offerings on their controllers. And the Joy-Cons themselves, if you buy them separately, are still very, very expensive. Just like the previous generation Nintendo Switch, I still think that the joysticks are still too shallow. There's not enough tension in them, as well as they don't provide enough range when you move them around. They are a bit wider this time in comparison to the original Joy-Cons. They're a bit softer, they use a softer material, but they're not winning any awards. They're serviceable, but I still feel like this is something they could have upgraded a little bit. One thing that I do love with the Joy-Cons is the new attachment system. So previously we had like a sliding mechanism, but with the Switch 2 we have a snap-on magnetic connection, which is it's kind of like geeky tech ASMR. I love it. I just love hearing it. It's a very satisfying click sound. Yeah? One thing I'm somewhat concerned about long term is the connection point of the microchip to the actual Joy-Con itself. If I push it with my finger, it's a little bit more flimsier than I would have liked. I don't plan on ramming anything in there, but I'm just kind of worried about in terms of like long-term use of connecting as well as disconnecting, how well this is going to hold up. So this has no bearing on performance whatsoever, but I am very disappointed in the lack of color on the Joy-Cons because the original Switch launched with very bright fluorescent colors with the Joy-Cons. Nintendo kind of went with a whole stealth black feel with the entire console of the Switch 2. You have kind of like a little shy peekaboo of color directly underneath the joystick, as well as the attachment point, as well at the side of the grip. But Nintendo's supposed to be like the fun company, right? Family-friendly fun company of the big three. but where's the color, man? It's like, give me some color, make things pop, make things stand out. It's a little thing, but to me, it's also kind of a big thing. The last thing I want to talk about the Joy-Cons is that playing in handheld mode still feels as awkward and cumbersome as it did with the original Nintendo Switch. It kind of just feels like you're trying to scratch your back with a wet noodle, especially when you play like more complex games like Splatoon or Zelda Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild. Holding ZR, pressing R, using the joysticks all at the same time, it just doesn't feel right. So if you're a person who had to use like grip attachments with the original Switch, you're definitely going to still have to use grip attachments to play in handheld mode with the Switch 2. Alright, so let's talk about the body, build quality, as well as the button layout. So as you can probably tell, not much has changed, and this is a good or bad thing depending on how you felt about the overall layout of the first Switch. Bigger screen, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but at the top of the screen, what I noticed, they're actually using much denser as well as thicker cooling fins. So this is probably because they have better hardware in there, so they need more cooling capability. And I love the fact that Nintendo is keeping the wired headphone market alive with a 3.5mm jack at the very top of the device. I don't know many people who are still using wired headphones. Maybe you're one of those people who carries one just in case your wireless set dies. They added a second USB-C slot at the top that functions exactly as the same as the one on the bottom. So you have the capability of charging from the top. It still supports audio as well. All right, so let's move on to the screen. As you can probably tell, the screen got a little bit bigger. You now get a 7.9, not quite 8, LCD screen capable of outputting 1080p up to 120 FPS. So I was honestly kind of disappointed by the fact that they went with an LCD screen. The LCD screen is good, but I would have really loved to see an OLED screen on the Switch 2. And honestly, if I was a betting man, I would call Vegas and put a futures bet that eventually a Nintendo Switch 2 with an upgraded OLED screen will come out. We all know what's going to happen. It's just a matter of time as the cost of technology gets a little bit cheaper. And I also am a little bit kind of up in the air whether or not I like the larger screen. First off, if it meant like a smaller screen with an OLED screen, I would have been all for that, just in terms of getting a nicer screen, but at the same size as the OLED Switch and the original Switch. But I also feel we're kind of like bordering on playing like you're playing on a tablet at this point, or like an iPad. Like I said at the beginning, it's already kind of cumbersome to play in handheld mode, and maybe I'm just being sus of this people in general and the population, or I'm just very suspicious of people. I wouldn't feel safe playing this in public transit on my daily commute. A device, the latest and greatest in technology with a gigantic screen, just playing on the train or the bus. I almost feel like you're kind of like painted like a target on your back. Like obviously if you're in the safety of your vehicle, that's great. The bigger screen is awesome. But in the public, I don't know. I don't think I would bust this out in public transit just because I wouldn't want the heat. I wouldn't want the heat of everyone just watching me. All right, so when we talk about mobile gaming, tabletop gaming, gaming on the go, one important thing that we need to talk about is battery life, because not all of us wants to be strapped to an external battery to our Nintendo Switch or constantly connected to a wall. And if you're a person who was hoping for an extended battery life with the Switch 2, I unfortunately have to burst your bubble, because you get about the same amount of playtime as you did with the Nintendo Switch original. So I did 3 sessions of Tears of the Kingdom on full charge, and I got pretty much the exact same time. I got about 2.5 hours of game time each time on a single charge. And yeah, despite there being a better battery in the Switch 2, as with time, you got better battery, but we also got beefier hardware that draws more power, which drains more of the juice. So you got new muscles, but not new stamina. You just basically break even at this point. All right, so let's move on to the final topic, and that is the games. The most important thing you need to consider when you're buying a Nintendo console. Those beautiful Zeldas, your Marios, your Pokemons. And unfortunately at launch, there's really no killer must-play title. I know it launched with Mario Kart World and I played it for a couple hours. And honestly, it kind of just felt like a DLC rather than a brand new game or new experience. It didn't really blow me away. And we know those games are eventually gonna come, but at launch, I just have to say there really isn't much to play at the moment. And I do appreciate the fact that Nintendo went with a late spring, early summer launch to avoid the holiday shortages as well as feeding the video game scalpers out there. But it is what it is. At launch, there isn't really a must-play title. So even though there isn't any killer new title at launch with the Switch 2, I did have a ton of fun replaying older Switch games because like 99% of Switch games are forwards compatible with the Switch 2. And actually a lot of the popular ones got upgrades. We'll get to that a little bit later to take advantage of the new hardware. So like playing Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild on the Switch 2 hardware, honestly, it brought like a tear to my eye. Like my heart started palpitating playing the game at like 60 FPS. I kind of wish I could like Men in Black mind wipe myself the first playthrough that I did of those games just so I can fully experience it at full resolution as well as full frame rate, that it's not choppy, you know what I mean? So 60 FPS on Tears of the Kingdom is a beautiful experience now. And Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, another game that got upgraded. I'll be honest with you, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is the first and only mainline Pokemon game that I did not finish. I did not finish to completion. I only played the first 2 hours of it for the channel just because the game ran so poorly. It was almost like inexcusable how badly that game ran on the original hardware. I just couldn't do it. I just could not do it. But I played it on the Switch 2. Perfect. Great now. May jump back into it and actually play that game to completion now. So yeah, another game that got an upgrade. Super Mario Odyssey got an upgrade, textures as well as frame rate, free update patch. So, and honestly, the upgrade path for the paid versions is kind of like a hot mess and it's very confusing. So some of them is that you can actually get the upgrades free with your Nintendo Online subscription. So for example, the original Breath of the Wild, the first game in the series, that is free, the upgrade with the Nintendo Online subscription, but it is not free if you have Nintendo Online for Tears of the Kingdom. You actually have to pay for that upgrade separately or buy the Nintendo to Switch version of the game. I just would have appreciated it if they would have streamlined the upgrade path a little bit. Like, here are the free games you get upgraded with for free, and then if you have Nintendo Online, you have all the games upgraded for free. That would have been very simple for me, and I would appreciate that. But like, yeah, the upgrade path is a little tricky and messy. All right, so final thoughts and final review of the Nintendo Switch 2 console. So I would have to say the Nintendo Switch, it's not a perfect console. It isn't. It still has all its flaws as well as quirkiness that the original Nintendo Switch 2, but it's still a very confident step forward in terms of the progression of this device as well as the handheld era that Nintendo is kind of pushing upon us. And I would have to say it's kind of like it's like the original Nintendo Switch went through puberty. It got bigger, it got buffer, it got faster, but it still has all its quirky charm to it. And let's be honest, we don't buy Nintendo Switch consoles to play Call of Duty, Metal Gear, Battlefield. We buy Nintendo consoles to play Nintendo games because unlike Sony and Xbox, who eventually there's like time exclusive windows or eventually they port their games over to PC. If you want to play Nintendo games, you have to play it on a Nintendo console. It's basically what it is. If you're a Nintendo fan, this is your new home for the next several years whether you like it or not, because you have no choice in the matter. And that's basically it. If you're a person looking to play the latest and greatest in 4K at 120 FPS, then you're probably best suited to go over to the homes of the blue as well as the green team. And that's pretty much it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the review. Hopefully I was able to sway you one way, another, or impact your buying decision. And yeah, thank you once again for Nintendo for sending this review unit over, and look forward to more Nintendo games on the channel.